What if the greatest obstacle in your life is not the one you've been blaming? Not the economy, not your past, not the people who hurt you, not the opportunities you never received, not the doors that never opened? What if the thing standing between you and the life you were created to live is something much closer than that? Something you carry with you every single day. Because most people spend years fighting battles around them while completely ignoring the battle within them. They work harder. They wait longer. They pray for different circumstances. They hope for different outcomes. But no matter how much change is around them, they continue to feel stuck. And the reason is simple. You cannot build a different future while protecting the same limitations that created your current reality. Most people never realize this. They spend their lives looking for external answers to internal problems. And because of that, they stay trapped in cycles they were meant to break. Not because they lack potential, not because God forgot them, not because they were destined to fail, but because they never confronted the one thing that quietly followed them everywhere they went: themselves. Now that may sound uncomfortable, but it should, because growth begins where excuses end. And before you reject that idea, think about something. Have you ever noticed how two people can experience similar hardships and end up with completely different lives? One becomes stronger, the other becomes bitter. One grows, the other remains stuck. One moves forward, the other spends years living in the same emotional place. The circumstances were similar. The difference was internal. The difference was not what happened to them. The difference was how they responded to what happened. And that changes everything, because it means your future is not determined solely by what happened in your past. It is determined by what you continue to believe because of your past, and that is where the real battle begins. Not in the world around you, but in the story inside you, the story you repeat, the story you protect, the story that quietly shapes every decision you make. Most people never question that story. They simply live inside it. They let it define what is possible, what is realistic, what they deserve, what they should expect from life. And over time, those beliefs become invisible prisons, not because they are true, but because they are familiar. And familiarity is powerful, sometimes more powerful than freedom itself, because freedom requires change. And change requires letting go of the person you have learned to be. That is why growth feels uncomfortable. It threatens the identity you have built around your fears. It challenges the conclusions you have accepted. It forces you to confront parts of yourself you would rather avoid. But what if those parts are exactly where your breakthrough is hiding? What if the life you want is waiting on the other side of a conversation you have been avoiding with yourself? Because the truth is this: most people are not trapped by their circumstances. They are trapped by the version of themselves they refuse to leave behind. And until that changes, nothing else will. Because wherever you go, you take yourself with you. The most important battles in your life will never appear on a resume. They will never be posted on social media. They will never be seen by the people around you. Because the battles that shape your future happen in private. Inside your thoughts. Inside your decisions. Inside the conversations you have with yourself when nobody else is listening. And that is why so many people misunderstand their own struggle. They think the problem is external: the job, the money, the opportunity, the relationship, the timing. But the deeper problem is often invisible. Because while they are focused on changing their circumstances, their thinking remains exactly the same. And if your thinking remains the same, your life eventually returns to the same patterns. This is why some people keep repeating the same mistakes with different faces, different jobs, different cities, different relationships, different opportunities. Yet somehow the result remains familiar. Not because life is against them, but because the battle they needed to fight was never outside them to begin with. It was inside them. The truth is that fear rarely announces itself. It doesn't walk into your life saying, "I'm here to stop your future." It arrives quietly. It sounds reasonable, logical, responsible. It tells you to wait a little longer, to be careful, to lower your expectations, to avoid disappointment. And because it sounds wise, you trust it. But fear has a way of disguising itself as wisdom, and many people spend years obeying fear while believing they are being realistic. That is why fear is dangerous, not because it screams, because it whispers. And the longer you listen to those whispers, the smaller your world becomes. Not all at once, one decision at a time, one hesitation at a time, one opportunity at a time, until eventually you wake up living a life much smaller than the one you once imagined. The tragedy is that most people don't notice it happening. They think they are protecting themselves. But what they are really protecting is their comfort. And comfort has a strange relationship with potential. It allows you to survive. But it rarely allows you to become. Because becoming requires risk. Becoming requires uncertainty. Becoming requires walking toward things you cannot fully control. And the human mind hates uncertainty. It wants guarantees, proof, certainty, safety. But growth does not happen in certainty. Growth happens where certainty ends. This is why so many people remain stuck. Not because they lack talent, not because they lack intelligence, not because God has forgotten them, but because they have made an agreement with safety. And every agreement with safety comes at a cost. The cost is possibility. The cost is growth. The cost is the future that could have existed if courage had been chosen instead. But courage is often misunderstood. Most people think courage means feeling confident. It doesn't. Courage is moving forward while fear is still present. It is taking the step before you feel ready. It is acting before every answer has arrived. It is trusting before certainty appears. And that is exactly why courage changes lives. Because courage creates movement. Fear creates stagnation. And wherever there is stagnation, potential begins to decay. Not because it disappears, because it is never used. Some of the most painful realities in life are not failures. They are unrealized possibilities. The life you could have lived, the person you could have become, the purpose you could have fulfilled. And all because fear convinced you that safety was the better option. But safety has never created greatness. Faith created greatness. Conviction created greatness. Action created greatness. Every meaningful story begins with someone stepping beyond what felt comfortable, and that includes the people God called throughout history. Because God rarely calls people who feel ready. He calls people who feel inadequate. And that truth changes everything. Because maybe your lack of confidence is not evidence that you should stop. Maybe it is evidence that you are standing exactly where growth begins. One of the strangest things about human nature is that people will often defend the very things that are keeping them stuck. Not because they enjoy suffering. Not because they want a smaller life. But because familiarity feels safer than transformation. Even when familiarity is painful. Think about it. How many people stay trapped in patterns they know are hurting them? The same destructive habits, the same excuses, the same fears, the same self-doubt, the same limitations, year after year. Not because they don't know better, but because those patterns have become part of their identity. And once something becomes part of your identity, letting it go feels like losing a piece of yourself, even when that piece is hurting you. This is why change is rarely a battle of information. Most people already know what they should do. They know they should forgive. They know they should take responsibility. They know they should be disciplined. They know they should stop living in fear. Knowledge is rarely the problem. Identity is. Because people don't always behave according to what they know. They behave according to who they believe they are. And that is where the real struggle begins. A man who secretly believes he is a failure will eventually sabotage success. A person who secretly believes they are unworthy will struggle to receive love. A person who believes they are weak will avoid challenges that could make them stronger. Not because they consciously choose it, but because identity always seeks consistency. Your mind wants your life to match the story you believe about yourself, even if that story is false. This is why pain becomes dangerous when it stays too long. Pain was never meant to become identity. A failure was supposed to be an experience. But many people turned it into a definition. A rejection was supposed to be a moment, but many people turned it into a label. A disappointment was supposed to be a chapter, but many people turned it into the entire story. And once that happens, growth becomes difficult, because every opportunity begins to threaten the identity you built around your wounds. Imagine someone who has spent 10 years believing they are not capable. What happens when an opportunity appears? Part of them becomes excited, but another part becomes uncomfortable, because success would force them to question everything they have believed about themselves. And questioning an old identity can feel terrifying, even when that identity is making you miserable. This is why some people remain stuck for years. Not because God has closed every door, but because walking through the door would require becoming someone different. And becoming someone different requires leaving something behind. The old story, the old excuses, the old conclusions, the old version of yourself. That is what makes transformation painful. It is not simply gaining something new. It is grieving something old, even when the old thing needed to die. And this is exactly why so many people remain trapped between two lives: the life they have and the life they could have. Part of them wants growth. Part of them wants safety. Part of them wants freedom. Part of them wants familiarity. And that internal conflict creates paralysis. They wait. They hesitate. They overthink. They delay. Not because they don't want a better future, but because they are unconsciously protecting an identity that feels familiar. This is where many people misunderstand God's work in their lives. They think God is only trying to change their circumstances, but often God is trying to change them, because changed circumstances without a changed person rarely produce a changed life. A new opportunity cannot fix an old mindset. A bigger platform cannot fix insecurity. More money cannot fix a broken identity. External blessings can only amplify what already exists internally. That is why God often works on the person before he works on the situation. Because if the person does not change, the blessing eventually becomes another burden. And that is a difficult truth, because most people want a new life, but very few people are willing to become a new person. Yet throughout Scripture, the pattern remains the same. Abram became Abraham. Jacob became Israel. Simon became Peter. Before the calling expanded, the identity changed. Before the mission grew, the person grew. And maybe that is exactly what is happening in your life right now. Maybe the greatest obstacle is not the opportunity that hasn't arrived. Maybe it is the version of yourself you are still holding on to. The fear, the insecurity, the old conclusions, the old wounds, the old labels. Because the future God is calling you toward cannot be built by the person you refuse to leave behind. And that leads to another uncomfortable question. What if the stories you keep repeating about yourself are no longer true? What if the limitations you accepted years ago have become chains you were never meant to carry? Because every transformation begins with a single moment. The moment a person finally questions the story they have been living inside. And that is where the next battle begins. Every person lives inside a story. Not the story they tell other people. The story they tell themselves. The private story. The one that runs in the background of every decision. Every relationship. Every opportunity. Every risk. And the strange thing about these stories is that most people never consciously chose them. They inherited them, built them, collected them over years of experiences. A disappointment became a conclusion. A failure became an identity. A rejection became a prediction. And eventually those moments stopped being memories. They became beliefs. That is where the problem begins, because beliefs are powerful, far more powerful than circumstances. A person can have opportunities all around them and still live as though they have none. A person can have talent and still act as though they are incapable. A person can be loved and still feel unworthy. Because people do not experience life only through reality. They experience life through interpretation. And interpretation becomes story. The problem is not that we have stories. The problem is that many of our stories were written during our weakest moments. Think about that. Some of the beliefs guiding your life today may have been formed when you were hurt, confused, afraid, immature, discouraged. And yet those old conclusions continue influencing your future. Not because they are true, but because they were never challenged. Maybe someone rejected you years ago, and the story became, "I'm not enough." Maybe you failed at something important, and the story became, "I always fail." Maybe you were overlooked, ignored, criticized, and the story became, "No one values me." The event ended, but the story remained. And over time, repetition gave the story authority. This is why people often confuse familiarity with truth. They think, "I've believed this for years, so it must be true." But repetition does not create truth. It only creates confidence. A lie repeated for 10 years still remains a lie. And many people are living under limitations that were never true to begin with. They simply became familiar. This is why self-deception is so dangerous. Not because it is obvious, because it feels normal. It feels like reality. It feels like common sense. But what if the voice you trust most is the very voice holding you back? What if the person who keeps telling you that you're not capable is not your enemy, not society, not your circumstances, but your own internal narrative? Because eventually every story demands evidence. And once you believe something about yourself, your mind begins searching for proof. If you believe you're a failure, you'll notice every mistake. If you believe you're weak, you'll focus on every struggle. If you believe you're incapable, you'll remember every setback. Meanwhile, all the evidence against that story gets ignored. Your victories, your growth, your progress, your resilience, your strength. The mind becomes a lawyer defending a conclusion that was never accurate. And that is how people become trapped, not by reality, but by interpretation. This is why transformation often begins with a question. A simple question, but a dangerous one. What if the story is wrong? What if the version of yourself you've been defending for years was built on incomplete information? What if your past explained your wounds but never defined your future? Because there comes a moment in every meaningful life where a person must choose. Will they continue living inside an old story? Or will they write a new one? Not a fantasy, not denial, not pretending the pain never happened, but refusing to let pain become prophecy, refusing to let yesterday decide tomorrow, refusing to let old conclusions define future possibilities. Because the truth is this: your past has a voice, but it does not have the final word. And once a person begins questioning the story they've been living inside, another realization begins to emerge. Many of the things they called wisdom were never wisdom at all. They were fear, and fear has been speaking for much longer than they realized. Fear is rarely obvious. If fear announced itself honestly, most people would reject it immediately. If fear walked into your life and said, "Hello, I'm here to shrink your future," you would never listen. So fear takes a different approach. It disguises itself as wisdom. It sounds mature, responsible, practical, reasonable. It tells you to be careful, to lower your expectations, to avoid disappointment, to protect yourself. And because those things sound intelligent, many people never question them. But fear has a way of stealing opportunities while convincing you it is keeping you safe. That is why some of the most limiting decisions people make do not feel emotional. They feel logical. The person says, "I'm just being realistic." But what they really mean is, "I'm afraid." The person says, "It's probably not going to work." But what they really mean is, "I'm afraid to fail." The person says, "I'm waiting for the right moment." But what they really mean is, "I'm afraid to move." And over time, fear becomes so integrated into thinking that it starts sounding like common sense. That is when it becomes dangerous, because you stop questioning it. You assume every fearful thought is wisdom, every hesitation is guidance, every doubt is reality. But fear has never been a reliable predictor of the future. Fear predicts disaster. Faith sees possibility. Fear predicts loss. Faith sees growth. Fear predicts failure. Faith sees potential. And the battle between those voices determines the direction of a person's life. This does not mean faith ignores reality. It means faith refuses to surrender to it. Because faith understands something fear never will. The future has not happened yet. And yet fear constantly speaks as though it already knows the ending. It tells you exactly how things will fail, exactly how people will disappoint you, exactly how opportunities will collapse, exactly how your efforts will be wasted. But fear has made those predictions before, and many of them never happened. Think about all the things you worried about 5 years ago. How many of them actually became reality? How many sleepless nights were spent preparing for battles that never arrived? How many opportunities were avoided because of outcomes that never occurred? Fear is often a storyteller, but it tells stories without evidence. And unfortunately, people believe them. Not because they are true, because they are familiar. This is why fear becomes stronger the longer it remains unchallenged. It creates an illusion of certainty. It convinces you that your limitations are facts, your doubts are truths, your insecurities are permanent. And eventually, you stop seeing fear as a voice. You start seeing it as reality itself. That is where many people lose years of their lives, not because they lacked potential, because they obeyed fear. One decision at a time, one opportunity at a time, 1 year at a time, until the life they feared creating becomes the life they actually live. The tragedy is that fear promises protection, but what it often delivers is regret. Because the greatest regrets in life are rarely the things people attempted and failed. They are the things they never attempted at all. The conversations never had, the opportunities never taken, the purpose never pursued, the calling never answered, the life never lived. And all because fear convinced them that staying still was safer than moving forward. But growth has never lived inside safety. Growth lives in obedience. Growth lives in trust. Growth lives in movement. And every person God used in Scripture had to confront this reality. Noah had fear. Moses had fear. Gideon had fear. Peter had fear. The difference was not the absence of fear. The difference was that fear did not make the final decision, because courage is not the absence of fear. It is the refusal to let fear become authority, and that changes everything. Because once a person begins challenging fear, they start seeing something clearly. Many of the boundaries they accepted were never real. Many of the limitations they believed were never permanent. Many of the walls they feared were only shadows. And that realization creates a question that changes lives. If fear has been lying to you about what is possible, then what else have you accepted that was never true? And that question opens the door to something most people spend their entire lives avoiding. The realization that God may be calling them toward a future far greater than the one fear has allowed them to imagine. One of the greatest misconceptions people have about purpose is believing they must feel ready before they begin. Ready before they step forward. Ready before they obey. Ready before they answer the call placed on their life. But if you study Scripture carefully, you will notice a pattern that appears again and again. God rarely calls people who feel ready. In fact, He often calls people who are painfully aware of how unprepared they feel. Moses felt inadequate. Gideon felt weak. Jeremiah felt too young. Peter felt unworthy. Again and again, the people God used most were the very people who believed they were the least qualified. Why? Because God has never built His plans around human confidence. He builds them around faith. And there is a difference. Confidence believes because it sees ability. Faith believes because it trusts God. That difference changes everything. Because if purpose depended on confidence, most people would never begin. There will always be another reason to wait. Another weakness to fix, another fear to overcome, another excuse to delay action. The human mind loves preparation because preparation feels safe. Preparation feels productive. Preparation feels responsible. But eventually preparation becomes procrastination, and procrastination often disguises itself as wisdom. A person spends years preparing for a future they were supposed to step into already. Not because they are lazy, because they are waiting to feel ready. The problem is that readiness rarely comes first. Growth creates readiness. Obedience creates readiness. Movement creates readiness. Think about learning to swim. You do not become comfortable with water before entering it. You become comfortable because you entered it. The same is true for purpose. The same is true for calling. The same is true for faith. Many people want certainty before obedience. But God often asks for obedience before certainty, and that is uncomfortable. Because obedience requires trust. Trust requires vulnerability, and vulnerability requires surrendering control. That is where most people struggle, not because they do not want God's plan, because they want God's plan without uncertainty. They want guarantees, proof, a detailed map, a complete explanation. But throughout Scripture, God rarely gives people the entire picture. He gives them the next step. Abraham was told to go, not exactly where, just go. Peter was told to step out of the boat, not given a scientific explanation, just step. Again and again, faith moved before certainty arrived. And perhaps that is what you need to hear today. Maybe the reason you feel stuck is not because God has stopped speaking. Maybe it is because you are waiting for information He never promised to give. Maybe you are waiting for confidence when He is asking for trust. Maybe you are waiting for certainty when He is asking for obedience. Because purpose is not revealed all at once. It unfolds one step at a time. And every step requires a decision. Will you trust fear, or will you trust God? Will you remain where you are, or will you move toward who you are becoming? That choice has shaped every meaningful life in history, because nobody becomes who they were created to be by remaining exactly where they are. Transformation requires movement. Growth requires movement. Purpose requires movement. And eventually every person reaches a moment where they must decide, will they continue protecting their comfort, or will they answer the call that has been pulling at their heart for years? Because the truth is this: the people who change their lives are not always the most talented. They are not always the most intelligent. They are not always the most gifted. They are often the people willing to take the next step before they feel ready. And that is what separates potential from purpose. Potential waits. Purpose moves. And once a person begins moving, another realization begins to emerge. The greatest risk was never becoming the wrong person. The greatest risk was remaining the same person forever. Most people spend their lives calculating the cost of change. They think about the risk, the uncertainty, the possibility of failure, the discomfort, the sacrifice, and because they focus so heavily on what change might cost, they rarely stop to consider something even more important. What will it cost if nothing changes? That question has the power to transform a life. Because staying the same is not free. It never has been. Every year you spend avoiding growth has a cost. Every opportunity ignored has a cost. Every fear obeyed has a cost. Every excuse protected has a cost. The problem is that those costs arrive slowly, so slowly that most people never notice them accumulating. 1 year passes, then another, and eventually a person wakes up living a life they never intended to create. Not because they made one catastrophic decision, because they made thousands of small decisions to remain exactly where they were. This is why comfort can be dangerous. Not because comfort is evil, because comfort is convincing. It makes staying the same feel reasonable. It tells you there will be more time later, more opportunities later, more courage later, more motivation later. But later has destroyed more dreams than failure ever has, because later feels harmless until years have passed. Think about the person you could become 5 years from now, the discipline you could build, the wisdom you could gain, the relationships you could strengthen, the purpose you could pursue, the impact you could make. Now think about the opposite. What happens if nothing changes? What happens if the same fears continue making your decisions? What happens if the same excuses remain in control? What happens if the same limitations continue shaping your future? That future is being created too. every day, every decision, every habit, every belief. You are becoming someone. The only question is who, because life never stands still. You are either growing into your calling or drifting away from it. You are either becoming stronger or becoming more comfortable. You are either moving toward purpose or moving toward regret. And regret is a heavy burden, not because of what happened, because of what never happened. The conversations never started. The dreams never pursued. The opportunities never embraced. The calling never answered. The person never became. Few things hurt more than looking back and realizing your greatest obstacle was not the world around you. It was the fear within you, the comfort within you, the hesitation within you, the version of yourself you kept protecting long after it stopped serving you. That realization can be painful, but it can also be liberating. Because if you were part of the problem, then you can also become part of the solution. If your decisions helped create your current reality, then new decisions can create a different future. And that changes everything. Because it means you are not powerless, you are not trapped, you are not finished, you are not condemned to repeat the same cycle forever. You still have agency, you still have choice, you still have responsibility. And responsibility is not a burden, it is power. The moment you take responsibility for your direction, you reclaim influence over your future. You stop waiting for rescue. You stop waiting for perfect circumstances. You stop waiting for confidence. You stop waiting for permission, and you begin building. That is where transformation begins, not when life changes, when you change. Because the future does not belong to the person who waits endlessly for certainty. It belongs to the person who decides to move despite uncertainty. And once a person understands the cost of staying the same, a new question emerges. If remaining the same is too expensive, then who could you become if you finally embrace the life God is calling you toward? 8. The person you could become. Most people spend far too much time looking at who they have been, not enough time imagining who they could become. And that is unfortunate, because your future is not supposed to be built around your worst moments. It is supposed to be built around your highest calling. There is a version of you that does not yet exist. A stronger version, a wiser version, a more disciplined version, a more courageous version. A version of you that handles challenges differently, responds differently, lives differently, believes differently. And that person is not created overnight. That person is built one decision at a time, one act of faith at a time, one act of courage at a time, one act of obedience at a time. Most people underestimate what God can do through a life fully surrendered to purpose, because they measure themselves by their current condition. God measures them by their potential. That is why Scripture is filled with ordinary people used in extraordinary ways. Not because they were extraordinary when they started, because they were willing to trust, willing to grow, willing to obey, willing to become. And perhaps that is the invitation before you today, not to become someone else, but to become who you were created to be. Because purpose is not about imitation, it is about alignment. Alignment between who God designed you to be and how you choose to live. The tragedy is not failure. The tragedy is spending your life disconnected from your purpose, living beneath your calling, settling for less than what God intended, remaining in places you were supposed to outgrow. That is why growth matters. Not because success matters most, because stewardship matters. You have been given gifts, potential, influence, time, opportunities, and all of them carry responsibility. Not the responsibility to be perfect, the responsibility to become, because the person you are becoming determines the life you will eventually live. And the beautiful truth is this: you do not have to become that person all at once. You simply need to move in that direction. One step, one decision, one day, one act of faith, again and again, until eventually you wake up and realize something remarkable. You are no longer the person you used to be, and that realization prepares you for the most important truth of all. Because the life God is calling you toward has never been about perfection. It has always been about transformation. For most of your life, you believed the goal was arrival, to finally reach the place where everything made sense, where every struggle disappeared, where every weakness was gone, where every doubt was resolved, where every prayer had been answered. But that place does not exist. Not in this life. Because God's purpose was never to create a life without challenges. It was to create a person strong enough to face them. And that changes everything, because when you understand this, you stop seeing growth as a temporary season. You begin seeing it as a way of life. You stop asking, "When will I finally arrive?" And you begin asking, "Who am I becoming?" That question changes the direction of a person's life. Because purpose is not a destination. Purpose is a continual alignment with the person God created you to be. And every day presents the same invitation. Will you become more of that person? Or less? Will you move toward courage? Or retreat into comfort? Will you choose faith? Or surrender to fear? Will you answer the call? Or continue postponing it? Because every day is shaping someone. The question is whether that someone is being shaped intentionally. Most people imagine purpose as a single moment, a breakthrough, a discovery, a dramatic event that changes everything. But purpose rarely arrives that way. Purpose is usually hidden inside ordinary decisions. The decision to remain faithful, the decision to remain disciplined, the decision to keep moving when motivation disappears, the decision to continue believing when evidence is absent. Those decisions seem small, but they are not. They are building a person, and the person they are building determines the future that becomes possible. This is why God often focuses on character before outcomes, because outcomes can be gained and lost. Character remains. Success can disappear. Character remains. Recognition can fade. Character remains. Opportunities can come and go. Character remains. And in the end, character becomes the foundation that supports everything else. Without it, even blessings become burdens. Without it, opportunities become distractions. Without it, success becomes dangerous. That is why God cares so much about who you are becoming. Because who you become will determine what you can sustain. The future is not only about receiving, it is about becoming capable of carrying what you receive. And perhaps that is what this season has been trying to teach you all along. Not simply how to survive, but how to become. Not simply how to endure, but how to grow. Not simply how to wait, but how to prepare. Because the life God is calling you toward requires a version of you that does not yet fully exist. And that is not bad news. That is the invitation to grow beyond your fears, beyond your excuses, beyond your limitations, beyond the stories that have defined you for too long. The invitation to become. And when a person finally embraces that invitation, something remarkable begins to happen. They stop living from the past. They stop living from fear. They stop living from insecurity. And they begin living from purpose. Not perfectly, but intentionally. Not fearlessly, but faithfully. Not because every answer has arrived, but because they trust the one who is leading them. And that trust changes everything, because purpose does not require perfection. It requires surrender. It requires movement. It requires faith. And once those things are present, transformation becomes inevitable. Which brings us to the final truth. The truth that changes how you see every struggle, every setback, every fear, and every season of your life. Because the person holding you back is not who you think, and the person who can move you forward is closer than you realize. For years, you may have believed your greatest obstacle was somewhere outside of you. The circumstances, the people, the opportunities you never received, the doors that never opened, the timing that never seemed right. But now you can see something more clearly. The greatest battle was never external, it was internal. It was the battle between fear and faith, between comfort and growth, between who you have been and who you are capable of becoming. And that battle is still taking place today. Not in your environment, not in your circumstances, inside you. Every day, you are making a choice, whether you realize it or not. A choice between staying the same and becoming more. A choice between old stories and new possibilities. A choice between limitation and purpose. And the beautiful truth is this: you are not trapped by your past. You are not imprisoned by your mistakes. You are not permanently defined by your fears. Because what happened to you is not who you are. What you struggled with is not your identity. And what you believed yesterday does not have to determine tomorrow. You still have a choice. You still have a future. You still have a calling. And perhaps that calling has been waiting for one thing. Not better circumstances. Not more certainty. Not perfect confidence. Just your willingness to take the next step. Because transformation does not begin when fear disappears. Transformation begins when faith becomes stronger than fear. And every meaningful life follows the same pattern. One step, then another, until eventually the person who once felt stuck becomes someone they barely recognize. Stronger, wiser, more disciplined, more faithful, more aligned with purpose. Not because life became easier, but because they became different. And maybe that is what God has been trying to show you all along. The greatest miracle may not be a changed circumstance. The greatest miracle may be the person you are becoming through it. So before you leave, remember this: you are not waiting for your life to begin. It has already begun. You are not waiting for purpose to find you. Purpose is already calling you. And you are not being held back by everything around you. The greatest barrier is the version of yourself that still believes you cannot become more. Let that version go. Step forward. Trust God. Answer the call. And become who you were created to be. Because you were never made to remain where you are. You were made for more. And before you go, take a moment to think about this message. If it spoke to you, if it challenged you, or if it reminded you of something you needed to hear today, don't keep it to yourself. There are people around you fighting battles you know nothing about. People who feel stuck. People who are questioning their purpose. People who are carrying burdens in silence. Share this message with someone who needs encouragement today. And if you're committed to becoming the person God created you to be, subscribe to the channel and join us on this journey. Every week we'll continue exploring faith, purpose, discipline, wisdom, and the calling placed on your life. Faith, purpose, discipline, wisdom. You were made for more.